Niccolo Machiavelli was born on May 3, 1469 in Florence, Italy. At a young age, he became the pupil of renowned Latin teacher Paolo Roncelliona. After he attended the University of Florence, where he received an excellent humanist education. In 1512, after the Medici dissolved the government, Machiavelli, suspected of conspiring against them, was placed in a jail and tortured for several weeks. He retired from his political career shortly after his release. Machiavelli's best writings came during this time. These include The Prince, written at the end of 1513, A Study of the Art of War published in 1521, and the Discourses on Livy, which he completed in 1518. There's perhaps no work of Renaissance literature that has left a greater and longer-lasting impact on Western society than The Prince. Though the work is short, its implications are far-reaching. The Prince is an insight and guide to the political climate of the time. It is of a particular note due in no small part to the realist style in which Machiavelli wrote. This style, in contrast with earlier philosophers such as Plato and Socrates, focused on actuality rather than abstract theory. In this way, the realist style became considered the first piece of modern philosophy.
Only the expenditure of one's own resources is harmful, and indeed nothing feeds upon itself as liberality does. The more it is indulged, the fewer are the means to indulge it further. As a consequence, a prince becomes poor and contemptible, or, to escape poverty, becomes rapacious and hateful. Of all the things he must guard against, hatred and contempt come first, and liberality leads to both. Therefore, it is better to have a name for miserliness, which breeds disgrace without hatred, than, in pursuing a name for liberality, to resort to rapacity, which breeds both disgrace and hatred.
One of the other things that Machiavelli proposes in The Prince is that oftentimes leaders will need to act ruthlessly, without virtue, in order to preserve their state, for the greater good, whether it be for economic status or to defend their own lands. The ruler will need to make a decision to act in this way, to defend his state. And the people will more easily forgive atrocities committed against a different side than against their own people. So he will be hated, but outside of his own country. And the public opinion within his own state will remain positive. And this is the theme throughout all of Machiavelli's works.
The treatise is not, however, without dissent. Notable figures throughout history, and even some during Machiavelli's time, debated the ethos within The Prince. Isaiah Berlin writes, "There is evidently something particularly disturbing about what Machiavelli said or implied, something that has caused a profound and lasting uneasiness." A literal reading of The Prince plainly demonstrates the amoral approach Machiavelli has taken. However, it has been apostate in the matters of politics. It is a necessity to divorce the normal ethical and moral values that have been instilled over generations to the general populace. There is some question as to whether this is possible, let alone desirable, but nonetheless, this moral paradigm shift merits further inquiry into the ethical teachings of The Prince. If it is desirable to separate policy from morality, would a good man in society make a good prince? Machiavelli stresses the need for a prince to appear just, moral, and strong, but in practice act in a manner which will most benefit oneself or one's country.
Constitution of the United States, so help me God.
Thus, the qualities of a good man are not needed, and can effectively be substituted for merely the illusion of such properties. One of the biggest statements that Machiavelli is known for is his view on being an effective leader. Is it better to be feared or loved? Though Machiavelli never phrased the notion with such brevity.
Machiavelli proposes that it is more effective as a leader to be feared than it is to be loved. That is because, as a leader, being loved is simply unreliable.
It has been such an influential idea that it is commonly explored in modern novels. William Golding's 1950s classic, Lord of the Flies, is one exemplification. Young boys stranded on an uninhabited island form two clans. The first was led by Ralph, a passionate and just leader. The second, led by a boy named Jack. Jack embodies the prince, demanding respect and loyalty through physical confrontation. Jack lies and even kills to maintain his position as the leader of the second tribe, and did so for the good of that tribe.
Here a question arises, whether it is better to be loved than feared, or the reverse. The answer is, of course, that it would be best to be both loved and feared. But since the two rarely come together, anyone compelled to choose will find greater security in being feared than in being loved. Love endures by a bond which men, being scoundrels, may break whenever it serves their advantage to do so. But fear is supported by the dread of pain, which is ever present.
These notions are echoed in many other modern and contemporary works of literature and art as well, such as Orson Scott Card's novel Ender's Game, the story of a boy who, at first, employs many ideas within the prince, but eventually comes to realize the pitfalls of such actions after he is forced to kill a classmate to retain his position. Card writes, "Human beings didn't evolve brains in order to lie around on lakes. Killing's the first thing we learned. And a good thing we did, or we'd be dead, and tigers would own the earth." Machiavelli's political beliefs derived from his dedication to the understanding of how the city-states of Italy worked. Almost all of these beliefs can be found in The Prince or in the discourses on Livy. Machiavelli expressed a unique preference to republic society and adopted this position on both pragmatic and principled grounds. He created a model of secure but not free policy. This came from his experience as a secretary in the Florentine Republic.
Machiavelli suggests two routes of discourse for the ruler, that of kindness and that of cruelty. The recommendation that Machiavelli makes is that should the ruler choose cruelty, hit hard enough that they cannot get back up.
At this point, one may note that men must be either pampered or annihilated. They avenge light offenses, they cannot avenge severe ones. Hence, the harm one does to a man must be such as to obviate any fear of revenge.
A possible explanation for the blatant encouragement of amoral behavior is stability. During Machiavelli's life, Italy was never more than a collection of papal states with continually shifting alliances. It has been argued that though it may appear that a prince is acting with moral discretion, preventing the state to succumb to chaos is a much greater good. This theme of patriotism is consistent throughout Machiavelli's works. The infamous phrase, "Do the ends justify the means," was adapted from this interpretation. Does order in the end justify fear of the prince?
Before anything else, a prince must be able to fight, whether it be in the political arena or on the battlefield. He needs to be able to win fights effectively. The prince's utmost duty is to preserve his nation and the interests of his nation.
A prince must have no other objective, no other thought, nor take up any profession but that of war, its methods, and its discipline, for that is the only art expected of a ruler. And it is of such great value that it not only keeps hereditary princes in power, but often raises men of lowly condition to that rank.
The job of the prince itself is damned. A prince must be able to sacrifice his own public image and his own well-being for the greater good of the populace and his state. Whether that means the prince goes to hell or not, he has to be willing to make that sacrifice.
Another contemporary view of The Prince is the book is devoid of ethics entirely. It is rather Machiavelli's guide to what a man needs to do in order to succeed in politics. A mere courier who shows the way, and that ethics and morality lie within each man's implementation of the prince, rather than within the knowledge itself. It is without question, the debate over the meaning of the prince will continue for generations to come, and the message no less relevant all the while.